All right. So, looks like a good amount of people are here providing this information, which is great. So that being said, we are right at time to start. So, and yes, if you did click on it, you submitted your question, your answer there. So thank you all very much. So I'm going to go ahead and end this poll. Thank you for providing that, and we'll go ahead and switch on over to our presentation for today. Our grant solicitation presentation. Give me 1 second for this to load. Perfect. There we go. So again, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. This is the OJJDP FY 2020 Preventing Trafficking of Girls Solicitation. My name is William Moore, and I am with OJJDP's National Training and Technical Assistance Center. And as your technical host, I would like to take a couple of minutes to discuss a few features of the Adobe Connect webinar platform and provide a few announcements to keep in mind. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube page. This solicitation webinar, along with other archived videos, are available on our YouTube page. You can contact the OJJDP TTA Help Desk for additional materials related to this and other webinars. For those wishing to download a copy of important documents and resources related to today's webinar, including the PowerPoint and other items, you may do so by selecting the documents in the handouts pod above the chat area. Here, you will find an FAQ and troubleshooting document that will likely address any technical related questions. Simply click on the name of the file and then click the download button. At the end of today's webinar, there will be an opportunity where you all can ask our moderator and presenter any questions. You may do so by entering your questions in the chat pod. Simply type your questions into the chat pod as they arise. I know we're currently during a time of social distancing, so I doubt that many people are maybe gathered together. However, if you do happen to be in a group, meaning it's yourself and maybe an additional person, type in the number of additional people with you. If you're by yourself, there's no need to type anything at this time. No need to type anything at this time if you're by yourself. If you have an additional person or two there with you, please type in the additional people that you have with you. With that being said, I would now like to turn over today's grant solicitation webinar over to our moderator and presenter, Ms. Tenzing Laden, for today's presentation. Tenzing, take it away.
Thank you, William. I hope everyone can hear me clearly. And I would like to welcome everyone, and we are really glad that you could join us today. As William mentioned, my name is Tenzing Laden, and I am with the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. At Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, we envision a nation where our children are free from crime and violence. And if they come in contact with juvenile justice system, the contact should be just and beneficial to them. Our mission is to provide national leadership, coordination, and resources to prevent and respond to juvenile delinquency and victimization by supporting the efforts of states, tribes, and communities to develop and implement effective and equitable juvenile justice system that enhances public safety, ensures youth are held appropriately accountable to both crime victims and communities, and empower youth to live productive, law-abiding lives. During today's webinar, I will provide a general overview of the fiscal year 2020 Preventing Trafficking of Girls Solicitation, We will review the solicitation requirements and eligibility criteria, as well as I'll highlight resources and tools available to help in the application process. There will be time for a few questions at the end of the presentation today. However, please note that I will provide additional contact information as you may have questions that come to you after the webinar or during the application process. So this solicitation was released on April 8th, and all applications are due on Tuesday, May 26th, 2020. Category 1, which is the project site, will be awarded in the form of a grant. Category 2, which is training and technical assistance, will be in a form of cooperative agreements. And the project period for the Category 1 is 36 months, up to 36 months, whereas for the Category 2 cooperative agreement, it's 15 months. A lot of applicants want to know whether they are eligible or not. This is also on page 1 of the solicitation. So in terms of eligibility, there are 2 categories for funding available as a part of the solicitation. First one is Category 1 project sites. Eligible applicants should be nonprofit organizations, including tribal nonprofit organizations, or they can be institutions of higher education, including tribal institution of higher education. For our Category 2 training and technical assistance, eligible applicants are nonprofit organizations, including tribal nonprofit organizations, for-profit organizations, including tribal for-profit organizations, and institutions of higher education, which including tribal institutions of higher education. Overall, we are looking to enhance the capacity of applicants, organizations to respond to the needs of girls who are at risk of or are victims of sex trafficking. The program should provide a prevention and early intervention strategies for girls who are at risk of or are victims of sex trafficking. Applicants should use best practices and variety of services to focus on the needs of girls. Population to be served are youth who are 18 years old or younger. For Category 1 project sites, we plan on awarding a maximum of 3 awards. We will have a maximum dollar amount of $400,000 per award for the entire life of the grant. That is up to 36 months for Category 1. Total funding amount under this Category 1 is $1.2 million. And you can also find this information on page 7 of the solicitation. For our Category 2 training and technical assistance, we plan on awarding 1 award for a maximum dollar amount of $600,000 for the entire life of the grant, which is 15 months. And total funding amount under this Category 2 is $600,000. OJJDP, in certain cases, may provide additional funding in fiscal year 2021 and 2022 to award made under Category 2 in the solicitation. OJJDP may consider, among other factors, OJP's strategic priorities, a recipient's overall management of the award, and the progress of award-funded work when making continuation decisions. And you can find this information on page 8. The goal of this solicitation is to prevent and reduce victimization of girls who are vulnerable to sex trafficking. This program supports prevention and early intervention services, including mentoring and other direct support services for girls who are at risk of or are victims of sex trafficking. Risk factors that make girls vulnerable to sex trafficking can include a history of childhood sexual and physical abuse, witnessing domestic violence, involvement in the child welfare and juvenile justice system, poverty, homelessness, lack of strong support network, or school failures or substance dependency. And you can find objectives on page 5 of the solicitation. Objectives for Category 1 are, first, to replicate and scale up prevention and early intervention programs, including mentoring programs for girls who are at risk of or are victims of sex trafficking that have undergone rigorous evaluation and or have a track record of success. Program models should include a plan to develop services and interventions for high-risk girls, including those with a history of trauma caused by a physical or sexual abuse, commercial sexual exploitation, and domestic minor sex trafficking. Next objective is implementation or enhancement efforts to identify and provide services to girls who are at risk of or are victims of sexual exploitation or sex trafficking. This may include programs like street outreach efforts, partnership with organizations that serve youth community, or collaboration with key stakeholders in the community. We would the third one is we would like our successful applicants to participate in annual peer-to-peer learning opportunity hosted by our OJJDP funded training and technical assistance provider under Category 2 of the solicitation. And for more information on how you should allocate, that expense in your budget, you can see Section D, application and submission information for more details. And OJJDP expects these programs to be based on best practices, and they may include a variety of services, mentoring, counseling, etc. We expect successful applicants to work really closely with the selected training and technical assistance provider. Objectives for Category 2 training and technical assistance is to expand the skills of program providers and other stakeholders working to prevent trafficking of girls. And this can include development and provision of training and technical assistance to OJJDP funded programs under Category 1 of the solicitation. Training can also be developed for non-OJJDP grantees working with girl victims of sex trafficking, including training for probation, detention center staff, law enforcement, judges, education professionals, etc. For Category 2, successful applicants is expected to develop and host an annual meeting for grantees funded under Category 1 of the solicitation. And you can find objectives for Category 2 on page 6 of the solicitation. And also on page 6 of the solicitation, there is a list of OJJDP priority considerations for applications. And these include applicant that addresses the specific challenges that rural communities face, applications that demonstrate that individuals who are intended to benefit from the requested grant reside in high poverty areas or persistent poverty counties. And there is a link there for more information. Also, applications that offer enhancements to public safety in economically stressed communities, also known as QOZs. And for additional resources, you can go to that link over there in front of you. Once again, you can find more details on OJP priority consideration for application on page 6 of this solicitation. So here is everything that an application should include, and we will go through each one of these briefly. Again, OJP's Grant Application Resource Guide serves as a vital tool as you are developing your application or your proposal. So highly encourage you guys to spend some time in reviewing the Grant Application Resource Guide. So what your application should include is the standard form, SF-424, project abstract, program narrative, budget information, and associated documentation, and that cost rate tribal authorizing resolution, if that's applicable to you, financial management and system of internal controls questionnaire, disclosure of lobbying activities, applicant disclosure of pending applications, applicant disclosure and justification if you are DOJ high-risk grantee, research and evaluation, independence and integrity, and the last here is disclosure of process related to executive compensation. And I'll go through them in next few slides. The SF-424 is required standard form used as a cover sheet for submission of pre-application, application, and related information. It is completed through grants.gov, and it includes a basic information, title for your project, and funding amount requested, and things like that. And it's on page 9 of the solicitation. Project abstract. The abstract should briefly describe the project's purpose, category you're applying for, whether you're applying for category 1 or 2, population you are planning to serve, activities that you will implement to achieve the project's goals and objectives. You should describe how you will measure progress towards the stated goals and objectives. Also indicate whether you will use any portion of the project budget for research as described in notes on project evaluation on page 12 of the solicitation. The project abstract should be submitted as a separate attachment, and this will not count towards your page limit for program narrative. Project abstract should not be more than 400 words, and it should be written for a general audience. And there are more restrictions on, the margin size and font size and things. So I highly encourage you to look at the solicitation more closely. Program narrative. Applicants must submit a program narrative that includes statements of problem, project design and implementation, capabilities and competencies, a plan for collecting the data required for performance measures. The program narrative should not exceed 30 pages, and please see page 10 of the solicitation for very specific guidance on fonts and margins. If you're including tables, charts, pictures, they will count towards your 30-page limit, but they can be single-spaced. Other things have to be double-spaced. Materials required, like if you are attaching budget narrative, in a separate attachment, they will not count towards your program narrative page limit. If you are planning to submit a bibliography or reference you can submit that as a separate document. Also, like we will come to it, like when you're talking about capability and competencies, like resumes and things like that, letter of support, you can include that as a separate attachment, and it will not count towards your page limit. If the program narrative fails to comply with the length-related restrictions, OJJDP may consider such non-compliance during their peer review process and in the final award decisions. The applicant should clearly explain the connection between and among each of these sections. For example, you should drive your goals and objectives directly from the problems to be addressed. Similarly, your project design section should clearly explain how the program structure and activities will accomplish the goals and objectives identified in the problem statement. Statement of problem. Applicants should briefly describe the nature and the scope of the problem that the program will address. For example, prevalence of trafficking of girls, specific needs of girls who are at risk or are victims of trafficking. You can use data to provide evidence that problem exists, demonstrate the size and the scope of the problem, document the effects of problem on target population and also on larger community. And, you know, you should describe any research or evaluation studies that relate to the problem and contribute to understanding of its cause and potential solutions. Any data or research that you reference in the narrative should include information about the source of the data, or you should include a citation for it. And you should describe the target population and any prior or current experience that you might have in attempting to address the problem. So talk about your experience, talk about your programs, successful attempts at addressing the problems and things like that. Project design and implementation. Applicants should detail how the project will operate throughout the funding period and describe the strategies that you will use to achieve the goals and objectives identified in the problem statements, and describe how you will complete the deliverables in the stated goals, objectives, and deliverables section. And we really encourage you to select evidence-based practices for your programming. And this section should include details regarding any leveraged resources. So if you're, planning to match cash or in kind like volunteer hours and things like that, you should include that in your project, and discuss plans. Also discuss your plan for sustainability of the project beyond the grant period. For applicants who are applying for Category 2, training and technical assistance, you should describe the types of technical assistance services that you're proposing to provide and how that technical assistance would meet the needs identified in the statement of problem. You should demonstrate the cost effectiveness of your services and describe how your experience providing training and technical assistance in the community and regional levels and working on preventing trafficking of girls. So just talk about your work history in addressing the problem. Please submit a realistic timeline or milestone chart that indicates major tasks that are associated with goals and objectives, assign responsibility, who is going to do what, and have like a completion time for each of the tasks by month, by quarter, for the duration of the award. Don't use calendar dates because, most of the time you are moving, you're a little behind the schedule, or budget approval takes time. So, that timeline sometimes does not work, but I think that overall, like by Q1 you will do this, or by, what month 1 you will have these tasks completed. That's more realistic. And there is a sample timeline provided also. Next is capability and competencies. This section should describe your experience and capability of your organization, your contractors or your subgrantees, anyone who's on your application or on your budget that you will use to implement and manage this project and associated federal funding, highlighting any prior experience implementing the projects of similar design and magnitude. Also highlight your experience, capability, and capacity to manage sub-awards if that's what you're planning to do, including any details of fiscal accountability in managing those sub-awards. Management and staffing patterns should clearly connect to the project design, and you should describe the roles and responsibilities, and you should include job description for the project staff and explain how programs organizational structure and operation would help to deliver a golden in delivering the golden objectives and whatever you envisioned in your application. And you should submit. You should include a copy of your organizational chart showing how your organization operates, who manages finance, or like how organization manages sub-awards if you are planning to do that, and management of the proposed project for funding. Last for program narrative is plan for collecting data required for performance measures. You should demonstrate that an understanding of the performance data reporting requirements for this grant program. Also, applicants should detail how you will gather the data required should they receive the funding. You should visit OJP's performance measurement page for an overview of performance measurement activities at OJP. Once again, I highly encourage you to visit and review OJP Grant Application Resource Guide for more information. Next item we have is budget detail worksheet and budget narrative. All applicants should use Excel version of OJP's budget detail worksheet when completing your proposed budget in the application. You should include a thorough and clear description of every cost listed in the narrative section for each budget category. The budget must be complete, cost-effective, allowable, and by allowable I mean it should be reasonable, allocable, and necessary for project activities. Project narrative should demonstrate generally how you will maximize cost-effectiveness of grant expenditures. And most importantly, it should be mathematically sound and should correspond clearly with the line item computation provided in the budget detail worksheet. And once again, I think I mentioned it earlier, but successful applicants under Category 1 are expected to participate in 2-day peer learning collaborative meeting in the first year of their project, and also in each subsequent year of the project. So they should include that in their budget. All awards made under Category 1 will be made in a form of a grant. Awards made under Category 2 for training and technical assistance will be in a form of a cooperative agreement. There is no match required. However, if a successful applicant proposes a voluntary match in their application and OJP approves the budget, the total match amount incorporated into the approved budget becomes a mandatory and subject to audit. And please see our DOJ Grant Financial Guide for more information. Additional information to include with your application. First is the indirect cost rate. An applicant with current or unexpired federally approved indirect cost rate is to attach a copy of indirect cost rate agreement to the application. If you do not have a current federally approved rate, you may request one through your cognizant agency if you're seeking indirect cost rate in your budget. If you do not have indirect cost rate now or you never had it before, then you may request a de minimis rate. Next is tribal authorizing resolution. If that applies to you, a tribal organization or a third party that proposes to provide direct services or assistance to residents on tribal lands should include in its application a resolution, letter, affidavit, or other documentation as appropriate that demonstrates that the applicant has the requisite authorization from the tribe or tribes to implement the proposed project on tribal land. Next one is the Financial Management and Systems of Internal Control Questionnaire. That's a form that you need to complete. Next is disclosure of lobbying activity. It's also a form that's available on our resource page. Next one is applicant disclosure of pending application. Each applicant is to disclose whether it has any pending application for federally funded grants or cooperative agreements that include a request for funding to support the same project being proposed in application under this solicitation, or would cover any identical cost items outlined in the budget to OJP as a part of the application. So the main gist is we want to make sure there is no duplication of funding. Next one is applicant disclosure of disclosure and justification. If you are a DOJ high-risk grantee, then you would need to provide that. Research and evaluation, independence and integrity form. And next one is disclosure of process related to executive compensation. And for any more detailed information or for any additional information or guidance on any of these requirements, including appropriate safeguards, please see OJP Grant Application Resource Guide. It provides more detailed information on what these forms are, the link to these forms, what is the requirements and things like that. So please see OJP Grant Application Resource Guide. Additional attachments, documentation of rural challenge. If that applies to you, as I mentioned earlier, OJP will give a priority consideration and award decisions to applications that addresses specific challenges that rural communities face. Next one is documentation of high poverty areas or persistent poverty counties. If you can demonstrate that the individuals who will benefit from the requested grants reside in high poverty areas or persistent poverty counties. And the next one is documentation of enhanced public safety in qualified opportunities zone, if that applies to you. And timeline, as I mentioned, submit that as a separate attachment. It will not count towards your program narrative page limit, but you should submit timeline and position descriptions. So where and how to apply? Applicants must register with the grants.gov prior to submitting the application. All applications are due by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesday, May 26th. To be considered timely, you must submit all the application. You must submit by the application deadline, and you must have received a validation message from grants.gov that indicates successful and timely submission. And we really encourage you to submit applications at least 72 hours prior to the application due date to allow for you to receive that validation message or a rejection message from the grants.gov, and it will give you time enough to address any of the reasons that caused the rejection notification. And every organization that applies needs to have a DUNS number, and if you don't have one, you should get one as soon as possible by calling the Dun & Bradstreet at that 866-705-5711 or by going online at www.dnb.com. OJJDP strongly encourages all prospective applicants to sign up for the grants.gov email notification regarding this solicitation. And this is really important because if solicitation is modified or any changes are made to the solicitation, only individuals who signed up for the notification will get that update. They will get automatic notification. So we highly, highly encourage you to sign up for that notification, email notification. Review criteria is under Section E, application review information on page 14 and 15 of the solicitation. Applications that meet basic minimum requirements will be evaluated by peer reviewers using the following criteria. So the statement of problem is 15%, project design and implementation is 40%, capabilities and competencies is 30%, plan for collecting the data required for the solicitation's performance measure is 10%, and budget is 5%. Peer reviewers will review the applications submitted under the solicitation that meets basic minimum requirements. The basic minimum requirements mean that application was submitted by an eligible type of applicant, requested funding within programmatic funding constraints, was responsive to the scope of the solicitation, and included all items necessary to meet the basic minimum requirements, such as program narrative, budget detail worksheet, and budget narrative. And it's on page 19 of the solicitation. OJJDP reviews the application to make sure that the information presented is reasonable, understandable, measurable, achievable, and consistent with the solicitation. We may use internal peer reviewers, external peer reviewers, or combination to review the applications. Other important considerations for OJJDP includes geographic diversity, strategic priorities, and available funding. Once it goes through the rigorous peer review process, award notifications will be made to those selected applicants. And on page 19, there is application checklist created to aid applicants in developing their application. So it's really, helpful tool to make sure before you press the submit button to make sure you have all the things that are in the checklist, and then you submit button. If you have any questions or need additional guidance, please reach out to the Response Center by calling or emailing the Response Center. Response centers are open 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday to Friday, and from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the solicitation close date. If you're having any technical issue, you can call or email grants.gov support hotline. The grants.gov support hotline operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, except on federal holidays. And that's their email address and their phone number to reach them out. Some of the resources. So the first one is 2020 solicitation. The next link is the DOJ financial guide. It's really helpful, especially when you're writing your budget or drafting your budget proposal. You can see what costs are allowable, unallowable, what's okay to include in the budget or not. You know, if for your subcontract, how it should be listed and things like that. And the third bullet here is the grant writing tip. It's one-on-one on how you can write grant application, what are key, it touches different aspects of the grant application. Some additional resources. The first one I have is the National Mentoring Resource Center. It provides a collection of mentoring handbooks, curricula, manuals, and other resources for practitioners, and they can use to implement and further develop program practices. So some of the types of resources that are available are guides and handbook for mentors, mentor training resources, program management resources, sample policies and procedures, recruitment and marketing tool resources for mentees and families. And some of the resources sample resources that link I added there are relevant to the solicitation. So, you can, at your convenient time, you can click on them and go through their resources. Youth Collaboratory is a current TTA provider for commercial sexual exploitation of children, and they have a lot of good resources as well. So that's their website link, and I have highlighted two that are relevant to the solicitation, toolkit for CSAC, and then for mentoring youth in foster care system. The next one is the Center for Combating Human Trafficking, very useful website as well. Once again, if you have any questions that we don't get to today, please direct them to the Response Center, and they will get those questions to us, and we can answer them and send you a written responses for any questions that we don't get to this afternoon. I think that would be the end of my slides. So William, should we open it up for questions?
Okay, yes, Tenzing. So the questions are have been provided to you, and they're ready to be answered whenever you're ready to read through them. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, William. Okay. So I'll take a few questions that we received from registration. When you were registering, there was a question. If you have any, if you want to share any questions or topics, so I'll take a few questions from there. So we have a question from Janet from Paving the Way Foundation. She asked, will there be more than one recipient of the grant funding, or it's all going to be one grantee? So as I mentioned, Category 1, we plan on awarding a maximum of 3 awards, and for Category 2, we plan on awarding only 1. So the next question is from Ruth. community, I'm not sure what the organization is, but the question is the 400 grant fund for a year or for a total of 3 years? So the funding amount in Category 1, for example, is $400,000 per award. It's for the entire period, a project period, which is 36 months or a 3-year time frame. Next question we have is more details on project funding, 1 year only, or it can be renewed. So I think the question is geared towards Category 2. OJJDP, and I think I mentioned earlier, in certain cases may provide additional funding for training and technical assistance in fiscal year 2021 and 22 but those are based on various factors such as what OJP's strategic priority is and how the grantee is performing and overall how they're managing their grants too. So different things play into that decision. So next question from Alyssa, Baltimore Child Abuse Center is mentoring a requirement / focus for this funding solicitation? So it is meant to be an extension of our commercial sexual exploitation of children mentoring solicitation. So while it focuses on girls, it should also emphasize use of mentoring programs. Okay. Next question is from Megan Baddock from Seneca Family of Agencies. She asks, may bidders include additional attachments that are not explicitly requested in RFPs, such as staff resumes, letter of support, logic model? Second question she has is, given that many bidders are operating in locations currently under shelter in place orders, are digital signatures allowed? So yes, you may include additional attachments such as resume, letter, support, logic models, etc. And yes, digital signatures are signature for application submission is allowed. Okay, so the next question is from Andrea, Made for Them organization. Her question is, for Category 1 project sites, can the program also serve boys? Example, if it is an after-school program, can the program also service boys that may be in the same class? However, the funds for counseling, case management, and mentoring would only apply to girl population. So yes, if you are running a mentoring program, for example, this is just an example, and you have both boys and girls in your mentoring program, and so we would not say you cannot serve boys, but our funding is geared towards girls at risk of trafficking or are victims of sex trafficking. So you can run your program, you can include girls and boys, but the grant funding should, as Andrea mentioned, should include only be funding counseling, case management, mentoring, and other direct services for that girl that's in the mentoring program. Okay. So next question. Okay. A lot of questions. Question from Delaware. Who were grantees awarded in the past? So this is a brand new solicitation, so we do not have any, so we don't have any grantees from past. How many victims should be helped through this grant? So it depends on your own program. Like we would, of course, like it to be cost effective, serve maximum population that you can. So it depends on your own program model, how your program looks like, what direct services you have, it can be really focused but really comprehensive programming, or it can be like addressing few elements and, but reaching wider target population. So it depends on your program. Are church ministries able to apply? Yes, if you are a nonprofit, I think I mentioned in the eligibility section, and I'll quickly, if you are for category 1, if you are a nonprofit or institute of higher education, then you can. Yeah, under category 1, if you're a nonprofit organization or institution of higher education, then you can apply. For category 2, if you are a nonprofit or for-profit organization or institution of higher education, then you can apply. So can quasi-government agency apply? If you're a nonprofit, a registered nonprofit, then sure. Will there be a time for extension provided to applicants for this funding opportunity? The deadline is unfortunately Tuesday, May 26th. So that's, I have not heard that there's any plan to move that back a little. But as of today, the deadline is Tuesday, May 26th. Okay. Okay, so the next question is, eligible applicants that propose to provide direct services to youth must not include youth who are age 18 or older in the population they will serve. Does this mean that if this grant is applied for to enhance an existing CSAC program for ages 12 to 24 services, that the applicant could not apply? You can apply because if you're serving girls between age of 12 and 18, if that's our target population, if you're serving that age group, then you can definitely apply. But the funds, the grant funds can only be used for girls that are between the age of 12 to 18. Next question is, why the category 1 sites funded for 36 months, but category 2 TTA provider is only funded for 15 months? The solicitation indicates that TA provider will host an annual meeting for category 1 sites, but how can that happen if TA provider is only funded for 15 months? So it's a good question. We usually do 15 months because we do 15 months. The project sites are 36 months because it takes time, especially for programs that are, new or implementing or adding a specific. So say if it's an organization that does mentoring, but they would like to add a trafficking emphasis, kind of like different track to it, it will take time for them to start that, to build curriculum around that and things like that. So that's why, we give that 36 months time. It will, make sure they have necessary people hired and to, for the project to be implemented and, for them to have that time to serve the population. For TA providers, it depends. Like we do 15 months, and that is for to provide TA services to the project sites. But we have in the past given TA providers continuation funding to and as I mentioned, in some cases but it's case by case basis. Our office would give continuation award for FY 21 and 22. So I know I did not answer it probably to your satisfaction, but I can look up more if there's more legislative language around that, and then get back to you. Okay, so is the maximum funding amount $400,000 for all 3 years or $400,000 for each year? It's for Category 1 project sites, $400,000 for the whole project period, which is 36 months or 3 years. Okay. So the next question, I will check that. The question is the eligibility, whether 18-year-old can be served or not. So I'll double check, but based on my conversation with leadership, and I'll double check the solicitation, it's 18 years or younger. Okay. Okay. Are resumes required for proposed project staff? And if so, where in the application would they go? So job description is required. Resumes are not required, but we highly encourage you to include them if you have them. And they would go as a separate attachment. So the target population for this solicitation is girls who are at risk or are victims of trafficking. Are letters of support or MOU only required if you're using partner, or should we have a general letter of support, letter supporting our application? You can include general letter of support from anyone, if you think that would make your application stronger, you should include that. But if, if you're listing a subcontractor or subaward or subgrantee, then it would be really good to have that, letter of support to show that you are planning to work together in future if you received this award. So it will make a stronger case for it, but it's not required. Cover title page, table of contents excluded from the page limit. I would not necessarily, you don't need to include cover, title page, or table of contents, but if you do include them, they will be counted in the program narrative. You can include them, say, you don't really need to include title page or table of contents, to be honest, because if you do, they will count towards your 30-page page limit. But you can include references and things as a separate attachment. So if you have letter of support and commitment, you can attach that as a separate attachment in the with your application in grants.gov. For any additional guidance on how say logic model or other things that you're including, if you're not sure how it should look or if you're looking for templates, then I would recommend you to go review the grants application resource guide. It has a lot of templates and things for different documents. So what is, oh, sorry, I think I'm running out of time, but questions that I didn't get to during this webinar, we will respond to them and we will send it out. So I think I'm out of time, and I do really appreciate your time today.
All right, great. Thank you, Tenzing, and thank you to our audience that's joined us. We appreciate your attendance for today. Before we wrap up, we just have a few last quick announcements for everyone. Please note that if you'd like to get in contact with OJJDP's INTAC, you can select the link here on the OJJDP page, or you can sign up for our listserv by selecting the click here link to get all the latest and greatest information from OJJDP's INTAC. If you need assistance with anything in regards to contacting OJJDP, as far as anything related to past webinars that are archived on the INTAC listserv and things of that nature, you can reach out to the help desk. You can reach us here at this phone number or even at this email address. You can also reach OJJDP at the link here, and you can also sign up for the OJJDP Juve Just as well. Do you have a training and technical assistance need? Well, if so, feel free to reach out for assistance via the OJJDP TTA 360 platform. The link to the platform is located here. Again, this, along with other webinars, are indeed archived on INTAC's YouTube page. You can simply click on the link, and it will take you directly to the page where you can view past archived webinars. For any support materials for the webinars, they can be obtained through the TTA help desk. And also, just an update, we do have a couple of other upcoming events with INTAC. That also includes our upcoming webinar this Friday with our Shift colleagues, and also a webinar for next month with our Children and Family Futures colleagues. Both of the links for registration are live here